I'm Brian Christner, and this is The Byte, a bite-sized podcast about containers, cloud, and tech.
Welcome back to The Byte. In this episode, we will talk about less is more. And I was always under the impression less is more was always a Unix term that the Unix and Linux communities came up with. And I was actually doing some research, which you should before you do such shows, right? And the term actually comes from a poem by Andrea del Sarto, The Faultless Painters, back in 1855. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. But then the less is more was also applied to building architecture in the 1947. So this was also interesting, where they tried to, reduce the complexity of designs, make it cleaner, less structure, white, try to make it more open, more like the Apple design. It comes from this type of structure. And then, if we look at the Unix part of the world, I guess it's less is more is like the less and more commands are actually the same functionality. Now, I want to take this a bit further and say less is more. We should also apply this to our infrastructure, our tools, our application code. I mean, currently, we're just getting bloated with so many tools and complexity and infrastructure. We're kind of losing our way in all these tools. If you've ever watched Netflix, Maria Kondo, she's like the Japanese organizing consultant, where she goes to people's houses and, helps them, pack things away and thank them for being service. We should do this also to our IT departments, not just infrastructure, but the entire IT department. I've been to a couple customers where I asked them, I'm like, okay, so how many monitoring tools do you actually have? And they took a while, came back. I think they had about 8 different monitoring tools. I'm like, how can you have an overview of all these tools? Monitoring, just for example, as a single business. I mean, this is super difficult. I mean, you should limit the number of tools. I realize large businesses, you won't get down to 1, but at least, cut it down to at least 2 or 3. I mean, 10 to 12 tools. I mean, come on, you'll never be able to have a global view if you have so many tools. And then if we go through all the other tooling as well, I mean, if we look at build tools, CI/CD and Jira and Confluence, all these things, I mean, you get issue tracking. How many tools do we use daily to do our jobs? And it really weighs on us a bit. I mean, if you look at the minimalism approach, where you try to get everything out of your life and try to remove as much as you can to free your mind to be able to do more things, we should be trying to do this to IT as well, in my opinion. Because if we're spending so much time on the tooling, how can we spend any time on actually building things and actually have the capacity to design new things and come up with new ideas on how we can build our application better, focus more on the business, on the application side, and how we can deliver more value to our organization? And how can we do that? Just, for example, the monitoring example. Let's just focus down on one tool for monitoring for your organization. Try to bring it down to one tool and say, okay, this is going to be the standard across the organization. You might have some variations. You might have some other tools that complement this tool, but everything should be focused around this single tool. And once we have that nailed down, we can go down to the next tool. For example, your build tools. So, or go back to Git. I mean, what's your Git repository? Do you have a single repository? Do you have, multiple different tools? Try to consolidate that down. I realize in large organizations, this is a huge ask, but just think about in your department, if you can make this choice of limiting the amount of tools you have and being able to focus more on what you're developing and what you're building, rather than filling out pages and pages of issue tickets and writing huge wikis about all the different tools you should use and the processes. I mean, wouldn't it be much better if we could just focus on building something, developing, and bringing value rather than tools? So think about it. I mean, it's just more of a brain teaser. Less is more, where we apply minimalism to our infrastructure and tools. I've been trying to do it with my personal life, trying to limit the amount of software I'm using and limit this different tooling I'm using. And it helps quite a bit. I mean, it's freed up my mind quite a bit. And it's also freed up my workflow. So my workflow has gotten quite a bit more efficient, because now I don't have to jump into 3 or 4 different tools and log it different ways and do all these different things. I have I have two tools for this podcast. That's it. I record it and then I transcribe it. Done. Whereas previously with my blog, I was using 4 or 5 different tools to write the post and do all these things. So by limiting the tools, it actually increases your workflow. It allows you to focus more on the product. Let me know in the show notes. I mean, you can comment on Anchor and let me know, raise some questions, provide your feedback, what you think about less is more. And that's all for this episode. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Byte. You can find the show notes at thebyte.io and follow me on Twitter at I Do My Own Tricks.